Congress. Okay. I want to welcome everybody and thanks for your patience. I want to welcome Congressman Schneider from the from the 10th district. Is that right? From Illinois? Is that right?
Illinois 10, correct.
Correct. Okay. From northern suburbs of Chicago.
That's
and
it.
Right. And you've been a congressman straight since 2017, but you've also were a congressman from 2013 to 2015.
Right. 113th Congress lost, was out the 114th, and have been in since.
Okay. You represent the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. You're also a member of the House Committee on Ways and Means, and you're also one of the co-founders of the House Abraham Accords Caucus. And I was looking you up. I guess I forgot when maybe we did this the last time. I saw, at least on your bio page, Wikipedia, at least, that you worked in a kibbutz, and you went to Northwestern's Kellogg School of Business. And,
undergraduate at Northwestern and graduate, and in between, I spent a year in Israel doing a program called WUJIS, where I studied Hebrew, and then worked at Kibbutz Ein Dor.
Oh. I just have to tell you, I went to University of Chicago for college. We always looked at Northwestern as kind of a party school, I have to tell you honestly, but I hope sounds like you got a good education.
Well, Michael, what they said about Chicago, it's where fun goes to die.
Yeah, that's right. So. That's right. And but fortunately, I work at JINSA now, which is where I get all my fun.
Right. And did you, having gone to college here, did you become a Cubs fan, or are you still a loyal Cardinals fan?
There you go. Yeah. But I like Wrigley. Wrigley's a great ballpark.
And your brother's the biggest Cards fan I know. So
yeah. Well, you have to meet our uncle. So
okay. Alan?
Alan, that's right. You know Alan.
I know Alan.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, look, Congressman, I appreciate but I was emotionally touched in 2016 and seeing all these Chicagoans come out and when they won the World Series. I have to say it was a nice moment.
I'll just quick aside. So I went to the train station after they won the World Series, and all these high school kids were there, and they were ditching school. I said, I will give you a note excusing this absence, because whatever you learn in school today will long be forgotten before the end of the month. And going to the parade after the Cubs win the World Series, you'll be telling your grandchildren about.
Yeah. Good for you. 100%. That was a great moment for all of baseball, I think. It really was. All right, and that's pleasant topics, or maybe just as pleasant. I want to talk to you about what's been going on in the Middle East, but I want to start asking you about Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech. What was your assessment of what he said or what he didn't say, or both?
I'll give you layered answers, what he said, what he didn't say, but also then some observations post-speech. That was a solid speech. I appreciated he talked about the strong U.S.-Israel relationship, how it is a strategic benefit to both countries, the United States and Israel, how important it is that we are facing common enemies, shared threats, but also mutual opportunities. And by building on those, it's better for all of us. I appreciated that he laid out at least somewhat of a framework for the future for Gaza, demilitarized, de-radicalized, but also to be led by Palestinians who don't hate Israel and want to seek its destruction. I think, I've been saying that from the beginning. Not an easy path, but the path we ultimately have to take. He honored the brave soldiers who have been fighting in what is truly an existential battle for Israel. And he thanked President Biden. He thanked President Trump for the Abraham Accords. I think all that was good. He left out some important stuff. I would have liked to have seen more substance around Israel's plan to secure the moment in Gaza. What does it mean to defeat Hamas so they can't militarily threaten Israel, but also can't rain terror over the people of Gaza, and what the plan is for moving forward. The Abraham Accord countries have said they're willing to engage. There were conversations between UAE, Israel, and the U.S. This past week. All of that would have been good to highlight. And most significantly, what he forgot to say or left out intentionally was talking about getting the hostages home today. Now, there's a deal on the table. We have to seal that deal and get that home. So it was a solid speech. It was not a perfect speech. What I said immediately afterwards, I have yet to hear any moment a perfect speech on the floor of the House. So you can always quibble with anything. It was a solid speech. The after action review, it really was a Rorschach test for many people. I talked to a number of people. Some of my colleagues who protested the appearance of the prime minister hated the speech. I'm going to give odds that many of those who hated it most may not have even heard the speech. So, that is what it is. But, you talk to some of the families of members of hostages. You talk to some of the other people. They wanted to hear things they didn't hear. I think for a lot of people, their impression of Netanyahu before the speech colored the ears and words they heard from the speech. So I haven't yet had the chance to sit down and read it. I want to look at the speech, just the words without the messenger. Like I said, I think it was solid. I think he should have touched on other things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I hear exactly what you're saying about more substance. He had one basic, I think, proposal. I don't think it really got a lot of resonance, at least in the post discussion, was about this regional alliance idea.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will share that on Tuesday, much of the week was occupied. The hostage families were in. We were having discussions. Coincidentally, but it worked out well. Within the Abraham Accords Caucus, we've created a Gaza working group, bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats. We had our first meeting last month with Ambassador Herzog on the Israeli perspective. On Tuesday, we had a meeting at noon with the ambassadors from the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco. And again, emphatically stating, you had Arab ambassadors to the U.S. talking about their commitment to the Abraham Accords, the fact that the ambassadors from those countries are still in Israel 9 months after this war began. They're committed to that future. And you had in a conference room in Cannon office building, the Arab ambassadors, Republicans and Democrats talking together about what's the path forward. So that's wonderful. I immediately walked from that meeting across the hall to my office and sat down with the families of the American hostages, talking about what it is they're looking for. They want a deal is so close at hand. You've got Gallant and Halevi and others in the security establishment who's saying we can weather whatever storm might come from getting a deal now. Let's get the hostages home. And I'm hopeful that that deal is completed soon and we can get those people home safely.
Yeah, do you let me ask you and by the way, I'll just note for the audience, I'll mention again, we're gonna be having Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer. We're going to be doing he's a former JINSA fellow in between his stints as ambassador and minister. He's going to be in office. We're going to do a webinar next Tuesday at 12 o'clock Eastern. And I hope everybody will join. And I'm going to follow up on some of these issues that the congressman has just raised. Let me ask you, one of the questions, of course, was the drama around the speech. And you already alluded to it, which was that, I don't know the exact amount, but it almost seemed like half of the of House Democrats didn't attend. Even Nancy Pelosi didn't attend the speech, which actually I wonder maybe if you could address it. Obviously, you're very pro-Israel. You're a very bipartisan guy, but what do you? And I know you don't share their views, but I think people would be interested to hear what you have to say.
I'm happy to touch on it for a moment. Look, it was, I don't know the exact number, somewhere between 50 and 70 out of 210 plus. So not an insignificant number, but certainly not half. And I was clear. I flew back. We mentioned that I was in office. I was out for 2 years. I came back. That I was out in 2015. But once you get that little pin, you get to come back and be on the floor. I flew back specifically for Netanyahu's speech in 2015. I brought many of my colleagues, past and future colleagues at that point with me, because I said it's important to hear what the prime minister of an ally has to say. That's true whether it's the prime minister of Israel, where people might take issue, or the prime minister of India, where people have issues with him for other reasons. We should listen to what they have to say, and they should it's an opportunity for those leaders to hear what we have to say. And so I was disappointed, but also in my view, those who weren't there, it was their loss more than anyone else's. And I think that's important to note. Some people watched it in their office. They said, I'm not going to go there to be there. I'll watch in my office. That's fine. I talked to a couple people afterwards, and I'll go back to that Rorschach test, and we talked that through. Some people decided to try to do counter programming. There was a meeting with family members of hostages that morning. I stopped by. I was a little upset. I left because they didn't invite any of the American families to be there. And I talked to the organizer, and he said, well, they're here with another group. Well, I could have arranged for them to be there easily. So, we shouldn't be playing politics with the hostages. These are 120 hostages, 8 of whom are Americans. We know 3 are confirmed dead, but those families still haven't been able to bury their loved ones, to say Kaddish, to get that closure. They're being held hostage, and we need to do that. So again, disappointed. Does it change anything? No. The message was delivered. Again, grateful that the message was I left out this bipartisan. He talked about we need to keep the U.S.-Israel relationship bipartisan. It shouldn't matter who's in the White House or who has the gavels in the Congress. Support for Israel is in America's interest, and we need to make sure people understand that.
Yeah. By the way, I'm sure one of the hostage families is Ruby Chen.
Yeah.
And is a New Yorker, American Israeli. His son was taken hostage, and it was announced, I guess, can't remember now, it might have been about 2 months ago.
2 months ago.
Yeah. That he was dead. And I asked him, what do you think of his speech? We were talking. I know him, I've been in touch with him since October 7th a bit, and he told me he's waiting to sit shiva, because until he gets his son's body back, he doesn't want to sit shiva. It's awful what these families are dealing with, of course. Let me ask you, and by the way, I don't know if you mind my asking, one of you talking about member Democrats, and I want to ask you about you personally, is actually, how do you, Vice President Kamala Harris, she was in Indiana, and usually the vice president kind of, I don't know the technical term, but she's usually there. Presides, that's the word. Thank you very much. Presides over when a foreign leader, and I think she usually does preside over these sessions, but she didn't, and I don't know if you wanted to address that also.
Yeah, I'll weigh in a little bit on it. I was in touch with her team. I think it was a missed opportunity. It would have been good for her to be there. She had this previous obligation. The world turned upside down this past week. Yeah. For no one more than Vice President Harris, right? From where she was to where she was. It was a missed opportunity, but also, this was a large thing she was speaking to. I think it's important to note that J.D. Vance was not there either, if we're going to talk about the politics.
No, so you're right.
That's important. And I'll give you my peak or my irritation. It's our chamber, House of Representatives, but when we have joint sessions, there are seats reserved in the front for the senators. Just saying that. So he had a reserved seat if he wanted it, and so did the vice president. Vice President met with Netanyahu yesterday. You didn't ask about it, but I'll touch it on her remarks yesterday afterwards. Yeah. And I will say this to the Vice President's team. I could quibble over Netanyahu's speech. I'm going to quibble over Harris's speech. Harris's speech, and I tell this to my team, I tell this to my colleagues, it's always better to say and rather than but. And this is a perfect example. I wholly support Israel's right to defend itself, to secure its borders, protect its citizens, and rescue its hostages. And it matters how they go about doing it for the future of the region. It's very different than saying the exact same thing and putting in but. And she didn't ask me, but that's the key thing I would change. I know, talking to her team, that's the position she's in. Israel has to be able to have secure borders, be able to defend itself. It's not just Hamas, it's Hezbollah, the Houthis, and at the core of that is Iran. And what Netanyahu said is that's our threat as well. In the same way with Bibi's speech, when he talked about Rafah, I could coach him there and saying, They expected tens of thousands of people to have died. We did everything we could to make sure that it wasn't tens of thousands. And one is too many. We are grateful it was only in the tens, but every life lost, innocent life lost, is too many. Those are things that it's easy to say sitting in the armchair. I'm not on the stage giving those speeches.
Yeah. By the way, I appreciate you raising JD Vance. I was surprised about that too. I haven't noticed what he said, why he wasn't there.
Campaigning.
Yeah, right. But still, right. I agree. It
Yeah.
was a opportunity. I guess the issue, and I'm not defending his absence in any way. I guess at least a lot of people think he's pro-Israel. I think, given that Kamala Harris is in this new position, suddenly everyone's looking at every little thing she's doing or not doing. She's, I guess, not as seen as there's some concern in the pro-Jewish community. I'm sure you know about her views, about Israel and the Palestinians. So I guess maybe there's a bit of more of a microscope about her because of, I think, the concern. I'm not sure of the.
Yeah, Michael, the way I would say it is the benefit of the doubt goes different ways. And for the Republicans, it goes one way, and for the Democrats, it goes the other way. That's all right. That's circumstance. And it is what it is. We have to respond to it. I have confidence that Vice President Harris is going to be strong on the U.S.-Israel relationship. I have confidence in part because Congress is going to be strong. And I have confidence in Congress because so many of us, folks on this call and others, have spent decades making sure that Republicans and Democrats understand the importance of that relationship, and we have to keep doing it.
Yeah. One of the things that she did say, and it was interesting, she issued a statement, I think it was yesterday, it was, I think, before her meeting with Netanyahu, condemning these demonstrations, a Union Station that I'm sure everybody on this webinar saw, where these pro-Hamas demonstrators wrote "Hamas is coming." They took down the American flag. They put up a Palestinian flag. You had members of Congress, I think Republicans, maybe there were some Democrats, I don't remember. I remember seeing Republicans going that evening and putting up the American flag back. And she condemned it because I think it was interesting that, I mean, I was a welcome, from my perspective, condemnation, because it was only, I think, a couple of weeks ago that she issued some statement, or I don't think it was a statement, I think she said it, where basically she understood the emotion behind these protests. So I thought, maybe she was trying to compensate for that and make that clear where her views are. But
yeah, I don't know. There was compensation. There was no way not to comment on it. And the Prime Minister mentioned it in his speech. He painted, I would say, too broad of a brush. But immediately after the speech, I had the gaggle of press around me asking about that. And said, did I agree with the Prime Minister that the pro-Hamas, pro-Iranian, we know from the Director of National Intelligence that the Iranians are trying to fund these protests, inspire these protests. Is it everybody? No, of course it's not everybody. Are there people who feel very passionately about an issue and are drawn to this? Absolutely. But when you're standing in Union Station in Washington, D.C., you're taking down the U.S. flag, you're burning the U.S. flag, you're saying Hamas is coming. This isn't protest. This is advocacy for terrorists, and it needs to be called out for what it is. I don't think there was any question from Vice President Harris. There was others. I saw one of my colleagues, I won't mention the name, who criticized the Prime Minister's remarks about the protesters being connected to Hamas, and 2 hours later said, "Oops, wait, they are." You see it. It's unfortunate. We're about the same age. I don't know if you remember Saturday Night Live when Steve Martin used to have a thing, independent thinkers repeat after me, and he would walk them into the thing. If you're an independent thinker, you should never start following a say and repeat chant, because you don't know where it's going. Yeah. And that's what these people, especially the young people, are doing. They're going out. They're saying, we want peace for the Middle East. I want peace for the Middle East. And then they say river to the sea, not knowing what it means. And then it's a problem. And they say intifada revolution. And now they're completely lost. And then we don't want 2 states. We want 48. They don't even know what it is, but they've now called for no Israel whatsoever. That's the problem.
I want to talk about the policy, but I want to ask you about personally, because maybe not everybody aware, and maybe you could explain it. I mean, talking about these protests, you personally have been targeted, your home and your office. Maybe you could just discuss this in recent
I don't
weeks.
mean to smile. I'm sitting in my study at home, and I look out to the street. A couple weeks ago, exactly 2 weeks ago, 2:30 in the morning, they came protesting, chanting. And I live in a lot of Jews live in my neighborhood. Several of them on the block have signs that say, "We stand with Israel, bring the hostages home now," etc. So as they walk down the block, they were chanting, "Zionists go to hell." And I have this because they posted it on their social media. They were well trained well enough not to come on my property. So I have no video of them on my property. I just have the audio. I have the police, but they were chanting in front of the house, if we don't get what we want, you don't get no sleep. And I slept through it all. So I missed it until the police knocked on the door. Fact of the matter is, these were people coming in the neighborhood at 2:30 in the morning, not to try to persuade me. You want to persuade me, call the office, we'll sit down and have a conversation. What they were doing is trying to terrorize the neighborhood, to scare my neighbors into telling me I need to change my position. The good news on this is they don't know my neighbors and they don't know me. The next day after the disruption, we had everybody in my backyard. The mayor's team, she was out of town, but her team, the chief of police, others, talking about what happened. And to a person, they said, we're not going to let them intimidate us.
Well, I'm sorry that this has happened to you, obviously. And I also think they came to your office. You also have protesters at your office.
So we had protests at our office on Tuesday. The one that made the most news is I have the flyers on the hostages. I have all the hostages flyers up on the wall outside my office. On the 4th of July, someone tore them down. The building was closed, so we don't know who it was. I met with the Capitol Police yesterday. We're going to have a camera put in the hallway, but there wasn't one. And that was, I think, a situation of opportunity. Someone wanted to tear them down, and there was no one in the building. But that was not a specific threat to the office. On Tuesday, there was protests. More than 200 people were arrested. These were Jewish Voices for Peace. It was a little weird as I heard them singing at one point, Lo Yisa Goy Al Goy Cherev. I was explaining to my team what they were singing, but they were loud. They were banging on drums. They were making their protests. They were not a threat. The bigger threat is what we saw outside the Capitol on Wednesday. JVP are misguided. That's a whole nother story. SJP, AMP, these groups that are funded and supported by Iran and others, who have then used JVP as useful idiots, unfortunately, to say, look, we're not anti-Semitic. We've got these Jewish people with us. That's where the real problem is.
Let me ask him. Well, I appreciate what you're saying. I'm sure still that even if you were able to sleep through it, it couldn't have been very pleasant for your family about the whole thing.
I felt badly for my neighbors. I have a woman who lives down the street, 2 houses. She's 97 years old, maybe 98 now. She still practices psychotherapy. She wrote me a beautiful note when I got home last night from Washington. She left me this beautiful note actually, it's right here on my desk, this beautiful note of gratitude, handwritten, and homemade jam. So, but she was woken up and terrified. 2 doors the other way is a family with twin toddlers, less than a year old. So those were the ones who were most disrupted. And it's just, it doesn't do anything for anyone, these protests.
What would you like to see? Because I think there's, at least the folks I know, there's a general frustration that either these protesters are allowed to do a lot of things and intimidate things, and either sometimes they get arrested. I read that some get arrested, just what happened at Union Station, and then a number of them get let go. I mean, I guess there's different kinds of protesters, of course, and then there's also the students who are not American citizens or are on student visas. What would you like to? What do you think we should be doing? The federal government, the state, the local government?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to split it in two. What should we be doing in the moment, and what should we be doing in a much bigger picture? And in the moment, I'm going to use what happened at my house. It's 2:30 in the morning, 40 protesters thereabouts showed up. It was the evening crew, overnight crew of the police. There were 5 police officers on call that night. That's a dangerous ratio. Quickly others came, it was 8. But what the police did is they came, they de-escalated, deconflicted, and then ended it, and they were gone within 20 minutes or so. No one got hurt. There was no vandalism. If there had been an arrest, if there had been a confrontation like what we saw at Union Station in Washington on Wednesday, I would have had 200, 300, 400 people outside my house the next day and the next day and the next day. So that immediate, what do we do? How do we decide? The police have to make that decision in the moment. I think at 2:30 in the morning, absolutely right decision. Now, if I take it to an encampment, something bigger, especially on some of these university campuses, we saw it at DePaul in Chicago, others, you can't let that, you give an inch, they take a mile. It's the camel's nose under the tent. They're threatening people. They're making it impossible for people to come and go. Those have to be brought to end much more quickly, and people have to be held to account. And we're seeing problems in communities across the country. Chicago is one of them, where the Chicago State's Attorney says, I'm not going to press charges on these people who are truly fomenting violence. And until we get to the place of violence, that's too late. And then you touch on a broader thing is, we know outside influences are playing a factor in these protests. Again, it's not everybody, but the people of good intention, those that are there, are being made fools by the people who have not just bad intent, but destructive and dangerous intent. We need the authorities, local, state, and federal authorities, to respond to that, not just hold those people to account. Where they are people in this country as guests, they should no longer be in this country.
Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you, on the time we have left, and we're going to go soon, just about a couple quick policy issues. You're on the Abraham Accords Caucus, you're one of the co-founders, as far as I know. You were supportive of work that we did that led the legislation. What is one of the questions, I guess, the general assumption, at least I've had, is that before November, the idea of normalization between Israel and Saudi is not going to happen. That it could have happened. Of course, you're going to need quiet in Gaza. But let's say, for the sake of argument, you have a ceasefire or some sort of, maybe not an agreement, the ceasefire agreement, but, Israel, it's much quieter. Their major operations are over. I saw in the Times of Israel today, some senior Israeli officials said it's possible before November you could have something. I don't know if that is. I'm just curious. What do you see? Or is this something that can maybe happen after November or after inauguration?
Yeah, I'm not going to predict timing. I remember August 13th, 2020, where I was in the car driving, and I actually was calling a friend of mine in Israel. It was his birthday. That's why I remember the day. And it was like, what a nice birthday present. It is the Abraham Accords. Came out of the blue. If you think 6 weeks earlier, Netanyahu and the government was talking about annexation, the collapse of everything, and suddenly we're talking about normalization, not just a cold peace like with Egypt, but normalization. And as excited as we were on that day, I made sure to I didn't get an invitation. I invited myself, but I was at the White House lawn for the signing of the Accords, because I knew how important it was. We were close. We were this close last year. In fact, it was because we were so close that I think the timing of Hamas's attack was factored in, or that was factored into the timing of Hamas's attack. So I'd be surprised, but it would not be out of the realm of possibility that we wake up Sunday morning, post Motzei Shabbat, and it says, oh, look, we got an agreement. I wouldn't put money on it today, but the chances are not zero. The chances before November, everyone I talk to says that a deal for a ceasefire and bringing hostages home is at hand. We just got to get it done. That's obviously the first step. If that deal can translate into, phase one of that deal, 6 weeks, there's no reason it has to go 6 weeks. If we can get places and Israel can effectively do some of the things that they've been trying to do. It hasn't been confirmed, but they took out Mohammed Deif. I don't know the status of Sinwar, but if we can make, miracle, Israel is the land of miracles. Miracles happen. So I'm not going to write anything off. What I am committed to, and so there's things I pray for, there's things you work for. What I work for is what we're doing with the Abraham Accords Caucus, the Gaza Working Group, that when that moment comes, when the opening presents itself, we're ready to move. And Congress is not going to define what the parameters are. We're not going to lay out the terms. We're not going to execute making the prospects for peace happen. but we write the checks. We can be supportive. We can do the messages, and that's what I'm focusing on.
By the way, I just wanted the audience to know that JINSA, in cooperation with the Vandenberg Coalition, headed by Elliot Abrams, we put out something earlier this year that I'm sure many of you saw. It's a plan for a day after. And actually, we were looking in what I've seen in the last few days. A couple of the things that we've seen reported suggest some of our ideas might have been adopted. We'll see what happens. And we talked to the Israelis closely at all the most senior levels. We talked to senior White House officials, folks at state. We didn't talk to anyone in Gaza, but one of the ideas we had is a private security force, which I see is being mentioned in the press, by the way, lately, and we'll see if that actually happens. But by the way, on that note, I agree with you, Congressman. It would have been good to hear from Netanyahu some little more granularity about that on the day after.
Maybe Gallant could come and speak to Congress because he has a pretty clear view.
Yeah. One other thing, and I think we're going over time, so I'll ask you one last question.
Okay.
It's about Iran. Obviously, Prime Minister talked to you about it. With all of what's been going on with the Houthis, with Israel, with Hezbollah, with Gaza, one of the things that is getting lost, I think, at least in the public imagination, is Iran's nuclear program. But then there's the conventional, what I just mentioned, the Houthis are denying we don't have free access to shipping in at the sea because of the Houthis. You have now this conflict with the Israelis where the Houthi drone hit Tel Aviv, and then the Israelis, in a rather major initiative, bombed an important port in Yemen. And it should be noted, the distance is farther than some of the Iranian nuclear facilities are from Israel. So I don't think you would have this Yemen Houthi-Israel conflict if the United States would take care of this problem, which I think it is an American problem. What do we do to really kind of, get a little more control, I think, over this situation?
Yeah, no. Yeah, let me pick up when you say it's an American problem. It's a global problem. And I'll use by analogy when I talk about climate change. Climate change is a global problem. America can't solve it alone, but the world can't solve it without the United States. And I think the same applies for Iran. It is a global problem. It threatens not just Israel and the entire Middle East, it threatens the world. I was in Argentina last week for the 30th anniversary of the Amia bombing. Iran has its tentacles across the region, and its reach goes well beyond the region. So we have to stand up against Iran. This is one of my most important priorities, something I'm clearly focused on. We put together the Abraham Accords because peace is the way to defeat Iran, right? The way, Hamas, you're not going to eliminate an ideology. Hamas ceases to have a reason to exist when the people of Gaza are free from Hamas and Iran and are teaching their kids to live side by side with Israel rather than seeking to destroy Israel. That's got to be the long-term goal. Secretary Blinken was in Aspen a couple of weeks ago, it might have even been last week, where he said for the first time that Iran's just a couple of weeks away from having enough fuel for a nuclear weapon. I wasn't surprised to hear him say that. That's not a new fact. We need to focus on the threat. And it's not just the nuclear, as you said. I don't remember where I read it. It could have been in JINSA. It could have been your brother wrote it or anybody else, but it was shortly after war. Iran, with the Hezbollah in Lebanon, its proxies in Iran and Iraq, the Houthis now in Yemen, Iran has established strategic depth was the word used. And that struck me when I read this, and this was last fall, November, December, because it's the word we've always used vis-a-vis Israel. Standing at Alpha Menashe, looking over the plain, Israel doesn't have strategic depth. And that's why it's so important that Israel maintains its qualitative military edge, why Israel builds its alliances. And again, the Abraham Accords. Iran launched 350 rockets, missiles, and drones against Israel on April 13th. It was the alliance that reflect the Abraham Accords that with Israel and the US and others that defeated Iran's attack. We can't just defeat the attack. We have to eliminate the ability of Iran to attack and even threaten Israel. And that's something that, as you said, the US has to lead. We can't do it alone. but we have to be at the forefront, and we have to do it with moral clarity.
I'm just going to have one follow-up on that, and then I'll let you go. And that's a good uplifting note. Do you think, though, maybe we should be hitting the Iranians back harder inside Iran, as opposed to, I mean, the Israelis hit something, the port in Yemen, that the United States didn't, because it has dual use capability, I think, and you get humanitarian aid, but it seemed to certainly get the Houthis' attention. But it's the head of the snake, as people have said, is in Tehran, and I wonder if the United States should be hitting back IRGC or Al-Quds forces there, and so on.
Yeah, I'm going to be measured in my response. First thing I'll say is, yes, I think we have to strike back hard and harder. And I think it's for us, and I'll leave it to the people with the most intelligence information, that I don't have everything available to me to figure out where that is. But we shouldn't be constrained. We need to make sure that that Iran knows we are deadly serious, that we will not allow them to have a nuclear weapon, and that our conflict is not with the Iranian people. And hopefully the Iranian people can free themselves from the shackles of the Islamist regime. And we know that the Iranians were allies with Israel at the beginning of the state. Iranians once had a prosperous middle class. They still have a middle class. It is anything but prosperous. But these are people who, given the chance to be part of the rest of the world, free of the burdens of this Islamist vision of a reestablishment of their global dominance, Iran could be, the people of Iran could be a partner. But there's no hope for that as long as the mullahs in Iran continue to threaten Israel, our allies in the region, and the U.S.
By the way, I think on that, I'd like to see this administration. And by the way, if President Trump becomes president again, I'd like to see him do it, or it's Kamala Harris. I'd like to see a little more vocal senior American official support for the people of Iran, especially when they're demonstrating out there and they're getting oppressed by the mullahs, as you say. I don't think there's been enough from Washington.
I two thoughts on that. In 2009, I thought the administration was slow to react on the Green Revolution, 100%. This past time, when you had the murder and the women were rising up, I think we leaned in, and the moment just wasn't right. Again, totalitarian regimes look impenetrable until they collapse from the brittleness. We didn't know when the Soviet Union was collapsed. We have to be ready and stand strong with the people of Iran. And we did it against the Soviets, whether it was standing up for Soviet Jewry or the refuseniks, Solzhenitsyn. And the more we do that, I think the sooner we'll get the change we want.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to thank you. You've been, I know, a terrific supporter of Israel, and you're very bipartisan. We need more of that in Washington, and both of those things, actually. And I appreciate all your work on that, and I appreciate you're taking the time to speak to us.
Michael, I have one question for you. My eyes aren't good enough. Who's in the picture behind you off your left shoulder?
Oh, well, thank you. It's nice. Yeah. So that's me and actually Netanyahu. I wrote a book based on my doctoral dissertation on Churchill and Zionism. So actually, the first time I met him was he read my book, and he was interested in meeting me, and he had some questions about it. So that was me talking.
So I looked for the picture. I couldn't find it. I met with Netanyahu on Wednesday. I was part of the escort committee. I have a picture from 1999 with him lecturing me. And I was trying to find it to show him. I said, some things never change. Good luck with your speech. But I couldn't find the picture.
Well, I'll send you the book if you're interested in the Churchill. Actually, I unexpectedly, not unexpectedly, I should say, Netanyahu quoted Churchill in his speech. Of course, he's a big admirer, and he said, "Give us the tools, and we'll do the job." And then he says, "Give us the tools faster. And we'll finish the job."
Right, faster.
Faster. Yep. That was a good one, I thought. And he actually now eclipsed Churchill as being the leader that's been invited to spoken to a joint session Congress, I think, 4 times now.
Yeah, he's got more than any other leader. So that comes with tenure.
Yes, I was about to say.
All right, well, it was good chatting with you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Have a good weekend.
I look forward. Thank you very much, Congressman.
Sure thing. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.